So,
Okay.
wow. Okay. Um, I'm assuming people can hear us now. I'd love to hear some feedback from people. Um, we're just getting a looping recording. The webinar will begin shortly, not working. Okay, so Matt.
Okay, so
so,
take two.
Take two, and everyone I introduced, everyone who's listening, I introduced everybody. I'll be happy to do that again, but I think that's obnoxious at this juncture. We had started the broadcast and didn't know that no one could hear us or that things were not going as well as we thought. So this is an amazing panel of generous people who have a lot of stuff on their plate. And I particularly just want to thank Song and Matt for taking the time today. I'll give more information on them and their backgrounds later. Matt was just explaining the SBA loans because that's where it started. So Matt, I'm going to just throw that back without being my adorable introductory self and talking about your A.
Okay, so when COVID-19 became a pandemic, the U.S. government basically said it was a disaster, and small businesses could qualify for that disaster if they had economic distress. And basically, they opened up their SBA's website to a loan application process of applying for a SBA loan. And this was the first of the stimulus steps that the government provided. And so what happened was, when that was first released, the SBA loan got bombarded with applications. Now, this first SBA loan is a actual loan. It's a loan that you have to personally guarantee. It's a loan that you have to have collateral for to back up the loan. And it's a loan that has like the regular application process. So you need a lot of documents and so forth to get this. And it's basically at a low interest rate, and you can use it and pay it back on regular loan terms. So then after that there was an immediate need for something. The government then said, hey, SBA, can you please give an advance on this loan with less stringent requirements so that we could get money into the small businesses? And also, and when they say small businesses, they also mean self-employed individuals that have businesses. So there was a SBA EIDL grant up to $10,000 available. And yes, the application was a lot shorter. It was like a 3-page online application that you had to fill out. And the funds are supposed to be available within 3 days. And I haven't heard any clients yet receiving that money yet, but that was a way to get money out there quickly. And then that grant, that SBA grant, will also be a part of the PPP, which is the payroll protection program, which Song is going to give you briefly about. So it's going to be like an advance for that if you do receive that and you did apply for that already.
So Erica, Matt had mentioned that you had applied for this. Have you received your funds?
No, have not received them. I think I applied last Friday, so it's probably been about a week.
Okay. All right.
And Erica, when you applied, oh, sorry,
Mm-hmm.
can I ask a question? When you applied, did you have to do all the backup paperwork, or did you just do the first step of the application and you're waiting now to hand in all that loan paperwork?
This was for the $10,000 IEDL grant. So it was an online application. It was 3 pages long, very simple. They just wanted to know what gross receipts were last year, cost of goods sold. And I think the year we were incorporated were the most difficult questions on that form. Otherwise, it was name, address, etc. So
that was my experience as well.
Mm-hmm.
So I was curious at what point in the process we are going to need to providing all that other backup paperwork.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that brings us really directly right into you, Song, where you can explain this PPP thing, triple P.
Sure. The PPP stands for Paycheck Protection Program, and I'm sure a lot of folks have been really kind of following the developments with this program. It's ever evolving and extremely fluid, but to give some background, the Paycheck Protection Program is part of the $2 trillion Stimulus Care Act that was passed by our government at the end of last week. Now, what's really attractive about this program is that, number one, it could become a forgivable loan, which is effectively a grant. The biggest difference with the Paycheck Protection Program is that rather than applying through the SBA directly, you're going to be applying through SBA preferred lenders. So the good news about that is that a lot of the lenders have been through the SBA loan process before. They have a very good infrastructure in place. However, one thing to really note is that there's still a lot of details that the SBA lenders and SBA is trying to finalize. So you have to be a little bit patient here. A lot of the bankers are working around the clock to try to make sure that this is ready and they're ready to take on applications, which is scheduled to start today. Now, who's eligible for this? All small businesses and nonprofits below 500 employees, independent contractors, and then eligible self-employed individual. So the timeline as to when you can start applying will differ depending on whether you're a small business, sole proprietor, or a 1099 worker. Now, the way that they calculate how much you will get from this loan is that the intent here is to make sure that you can keep your payroll and not have to let them go for a period of time so that we can reduce the unemployment line. So the way they calculate that is going to be based on your average monthly payroll for the last 12 months and then multiplying that by 2.5 times. And that amount that will then be given to you as a loan will be considered forgivable as long as you are using those proceeds to pay for at least 75% of it with your payroll for the next 8 weeks, and then the remaining up to 25% could be used to pay your utility payments, rent, and interest on mortgage. So as long as you do those things, it can be considered forgiven, that's what makes it very attractive. On top of that, it doesn't require any collateral or personal guarantee. And they're trying to, again, and similar to what Matt mentioned with the economic injury disaster loan, they're really trying to cut through the red tape so they can get this capital out to the small business and sole proprietors and freelancers like everyone as fast as they can. So again, work with your SBA preferred lender on this one and make sure you're ready to go. The downside is the fact that of the portion that's not forgivable, it will be considered a 1% interest rate loan to be paid up to 2 years. And at least 6 months of that will be considered deferred payment. So even if it's not considered a forgivable loan, that portion is still very attractive for a lot of small business owners and individuals out there.
I'm sorry to be daft here if you kind of explained this, but if you're a sole proprietor, if you're the only employee with your company, you are considered the employee that is the payroll, 75% of that? Like, I'm sorry if am I saying this wrong? Heather, help me out.
No, I think that's a very valid question, and we've gotten that before. As long as you've historically had payroll, even if you're a sole proprietor, you can use that historical monthly payroll number you were paying yourself to come up with a 2.5 times total.
So I have a question for you. If you have, say, 5 employees that work for you, and your payroll last year is different than your payroll this year, you gave people raises, how does that factor in to your calculation?
The SBA and lenders are still trying to kind of look at this in black and white as much as possible, even though we know in reality there's a lot of dynamics going into it, Heather. But what they're going to look at is your historical numbers. Some of the lenders, they've even simplified it by saying, hey, show us your monthly P&L for the last 12 months, and with your payroll number, just take the monthly average that you had for that to determine what's the baseline number you use to multiply the 2.5 times.
Can I go? I'm sorry.
Yeah, I just want to say, you may also have to go by what your bank is requiring you to do. So, for example, I got information from my bank that said they wanted information on payroll from 2019. And I really wanted to submit 2020 because I had more employees in 2020 in the first quarter, and they said that they're not taking that. So
yeah, so the thing about the 2019 is it's easy to verify because the 941s and the W-2s already been filed, whereas Q1 is due April 30th, and it might be an extension for that too. So it's a good rule of thumb to kind of bank on the calendar year right now as the benchmark that they're going to use of 2019.
So I got a question via text
Go
saying,
ahead.
regarding my question, if you're the only person that you have, that you're sole proprietor and you do not have a payroll, like you don't have a payroll system, it's just
so what the doc and the bill say to that is that you have to like prove your Schedule C income, which is kind of like your payroll, like your profit, and that is going to, because Schedule C owners and freelancers aren't required to have payroll, so that's going to count. So if someone had, you know, $80,000 of self-employment income from a Schedule C, divide that by 12 times 2.5 months, that would be considered their payroll, that they could probably prove that if they have their 2019 return done already, they could show that, or they have to fall back to their 2018 return to show that income. And again, like Song was saying, it's still depending on what the banks are going to be requesting as far as backup for that. But that is a provision that allows the freelancers to apply for this in absence of actual payroll through a payroll company.
I think that's why a lot of photographers, this is one of the people who are chiming into me, who has my cell phone. So I guess anybody who has that can ask me a question. But it's Nader from San Francisco, and he's saying exactly, that's why a lot of photographers don't think that they qualify for this PPP, which is the which you just explained. So thank you for that. I'm also getting a question from Sue in San Francisco. I also applied online through SBA, but Song is saying that we need to apply through our banks. She's already done an application online, but obviously not through her bank, that she did a direct application. You're saying it can only go through bank.
So maybe we should clarify here. Right now, the loan that you can apply directly with the SBA website was the first loan that Matt was talking to, and that's called the Economic Injury Disaster Loan. The PPP loan is administered and managed by the lenders, who are the preferred lenders. So you may be able to apply through the bank's online portal, which many of them they're trying to set up at this point. But at this point, you cannot apply for the PPP directly through SBA website. And
one important point to add on to the Song is that you can't like double dip here. So that advance, the SBA grant, that you have to disclose that on your application that you have that pending. And so it's not like you can get that 10,000 forgiven on top of your 2.5 times. That would come off the 2.5 times loan that you would get. So that the first thing that we were speaking about, the grant was just a quick advance, and then it piggybacks onto this PPP. So that's why it's confusing. But you're going to two different places to get the funds, but you have to disclose that.
And they'll be, and they'll, in the end, it'll be together. Like if you got the 10,000, it's coming off of anything that you might get through PPP.
Exactly.
Okay. Right. So,
I think it's probably worth, can I chime in, Heidi?
Sure.
I think it's probably also worth explaining how the banks are handling this in terms of you might not just be able to pick up the phone and call your current bank and have them be either SBA approved or, they might not be helping with these loans. I know that my experience was that when I first reached out to my bank, they told me they were not doing this at all. And then I needed to look around for other banks. And that was a challenging process because unless I had a current loan with them or unless I had a bank account with them, they were either putting me on a list to get to at some point or turning me away and sending me somewhere else. So I think, some people think it might be easy to just reach out to your bank and you're going to put this application in, but can you talk to that a little bit about, and I know it's changing by the second, but the process of finding a bank to help you.
Yeah, sure. I can talk to a little bit, Matt. Feel free to jump in, anything I'm missing. But you're absolutely right, Heather. What's happening right now is that these SBA preferred lenders out there, they're trying to prioritize folks who either have existing loan with that bank or have an existing banking relationship, like a corporate bank account with them. Mm-hmm. And the incentive is pretty straightforward because the banks who already have borrowers who have debt already with them, they want to make sure that they're able to get these benefits so that they can continue staying around and make sure that the loans that the bank has will be serviced going forward. So they're trying to make sure they kind of take care of their own customers first to make sure they can get their debt paid back eventually. However, there's going to be a time down the road where all of these banks will open up their applications for non-customers. We just don't know when that's going to happen yet. While as intimidating as that sounds, the reality is that if you have a corporate banking relationship today for your business, whether it be a small business or a freelancer, the reality is the majority of the banks today are SBA preferred lenders. So you likely already have an account with them. So I'm talking about the Wells Fargo of the world, Bank of America, Chase, Union Bank. A lot of these lenders are already preferred lenders. So it just requires you reaching out to them and making sure that they are a preferred lender and understanding their process for starting this application for the PPP.
Okay, I want to move into some explanations for the unemployment stuff, and I'm not sure, I know that is potentially a state-to-state thing, so I'm not sure how deeply you guys can get into it, but from this portion of the conversation, I've gotten several questions. A common question, what about a business that just started this year? Am I shit out of luck? This is a direct question.
So if the business had payroll before February 15th, you can still apply and use the monthly average for your 2.5 times the loan amount. So you're not out of luck. If you didn't start payroll yet, then you might be out of luck. So, or you might have to try to apply on what your situation was in the prior year, is what we're telling our clients that started without a payroll yet. So.
Okay, Melanie from Texas writes, if you have furloughed your employees and they are filing for unemployment, can you still receive the PPP money and pay them on top of their unemployment?
So you'd have to hire them back. That's like a double dip situation. You'd have to hire them back and they would have to go off unemployment to qualify as a expenditure to get the loan forgiven.
Okay, Timothy writes, should you apply for both through the SBA grant and the PPP? Should you apply for both, the grant and
so you
the advice we've been giving.
Go ahead, Song.
You should definitely apply. And if you get to the point where you have the option to accept both, you can deal with that at that point. But right now, we don't know what their selection criteria fully is going to be for both. But to Matt's point earlier, you cannot double dip. So in other words, the guidance that we've been given from our lenders is that you can basically choose one or the other once you know what's been accepted for you.
Okay, and so now can we delve into a little bit about the unemployment elements? I realize that all of the changes are depending on state. I was just wondering if your panel knows anything about the specifics of this based on the new 2T law that was passed by Congress last week. I don't even know what that is. I'm just going to tell you.
I mean, I've been following this a little bit closer, but I would say for anybody like listening out there, the advice would be if you can get the SBA grant or SBA loan and the PPP, to maybe start there, because that's it's basically free money right now, whereas unemployment's still taxable, and you can keep the unemployment benefits like in your back pocket as if these run out or if you don't get them. So I would use unemployment as a last resort. And what the new law, which I think is what you're referring to, did is it allowed unemployment benefits available for those that were self-employed that they weren't in the past because of this pandemic. So that's what's causing the bog down with the states trying to figure out how to implement that when people aren't really in the office and people aren't really working, and how to do that. And it's slowing down getting the checks to people. So I think that's what the law that you were referring to is.
I will believe you, because I don't know what you're referring to. If we are sole proprietor, this is just a question that just came through, but I kind of think it was answered maybe there's a nuance here that I'm not seeing. If we are a sole proprietor with no employees, is one loan more beneficial than the other one? I pay myself a consistent amount every month, but not officially on payroll. I think you answered that with the Schedule C answer, right?
Right. So if you are a self-employed person, you can use your profit from your Schedule C. That would be considered payroll under these PPP guidelines. So you would take that divided by 12 and multiply that by 2.5 times, and that could be the amount that you can use as your application amount.
Vinny Finn just texted me. God, I love that my clients all have my cell phone. I just want to take a minute and say that. Matthew said, keep unemployment benefits in your back pocket. What does he mean by that? I assumed if you applied for unemployment, you could not apply for the disaster or the PPP loan.
So if you already went on unemployment, or your employer, you went on unemployment, your employer has the option, if they're getting this like PPP, to hire you back. Instead of you receiving the funds via unemployment, you could get your payroll and you could still work or try to work during this this crazy time. Now, the thing about referring to the back pocket is that yes, unemployment is a benefit, and it is a taxable benefit to you, but this PPP program is basically free money if you're a self-employed person or a business owner that has payroll, to keep people off of unemployment. And I just think it's like a once in a lifetime opportunity to use this, where unemployment's available. And then the only negative thing about unemployment too is that it based on your experience, it would also increase your future rates in the future. So that's why I'm recommending that unemployment would be the last resort. Ahead of these programs are much more beneficial than unemployment.
I think that was really.
I'll just add one. I'll kind of add one more thing to Matt's point to hammer home about keeping unemployment in your back pocket. Right now, we don't really know how long this disruption is going to last for everybody's industry. So we have to be very thoughtful with our plans going forward for everybody. And I think to Matt's point earlier, we want to try to go after what we consider to be the most easiest access to capital. And I think the options that's been laid out by the SBA is amazing. And if anything, we're incentivized to try to go for that first. But again, we don't know how much cash we'll need down the road, 3 months, 4 months down the road. If we're still in a tough position, you want to have that access to unemployment as a good backup plan. So you don't want to use that up too early.
I have a.
Heidi, can I chime in with a question that I got?
Yeah, please.
Somebody is texting me wondering how any of this will affect their credit. Or at this point, do we not even be worried about that?
So all three products, right? They start off as a loan, and the SBA loan is a credit check, and it is a loan. The SBA grant and the PPP start off as a loan too, but there's no personal guarantee and there's no credit worthiness. They're supposed to make this available despite your credit. Now the one on the flip side, you do have to certify that you are an economic disaster. So if you're like one of my plastic surgeon clients that makes over $2 million a year and you can't do plastic surgery for the next 30 days, do you really want this associated with that type of prestige when you go to do future business dealings, that you went to apply for a $10,000 disaster grant when you weren't really in a disaster mode? So but I think most of the audience, they're not in that category. So if you're that's the only thing, is that it'll be on your record as applying for this type of stimulus, because it is technically a loan in the beginning.
I have a question. Is there a application for 1099 people to try to? Are there special applications for 1099 people who are trying to collect unemployment? Or sole proprietors or single owners?
I don't believe it's a special application, but I do know as part of the expanded COVID-19 unemployment benefits, it's expanded the coverage in terms of who can apply for it and the amount of money they can get. I think it's the same application though.
Yeah, because I mean, a week ago, my husband tried to do this. He's an owner of his own business. And he went through the application and he got to the part where it said self-employed and couldn't go any further on the application because that disqualifies you. So some of these systems are not up yet. They're not updated yet in terms of the applications and the laws, right?
I think you're exactly right, Heidi. I mean, everything's just moving so quickly, and everyone's intent is in the right place, but the actual execution of it may be a little bit slower.
Okay, so I have another question. If somebody wanted to get a W-2 job helping grocery stores as a stocker, a temporary thing to help society while things work out, but still plan to be a sole proprietor for a commercial photography, you know, in a few months, would that mess anything up?
I don't see why that would mess anything up, unless you were, you know, applying for this payroll protection program and then going out and getting a W-2 job too during the time. I think that might be a little conflict of interest of the intent of the law.
Okay, so this is a really good question. So a few of my photographers they also teach, right? So their photography businesses, you know, at a dead halt right now, but they're still teaching 1 week, you know, 1 day a week, and they get paid a small amount for that on a monthly basis. How does that affect applying for these kinds of loans and or unemployment? Like if they want to, you know, apply for unemployment and they have this small level of employment, do they have to quit that job in order to be eligible?
All right, so you want, so I think, so let's talk about like lifestyle here. If you're a photographer and you are applying for this program to pay your like normal lifestyle, the 2.5 times will do that because it'll prevent you from going on unemployment. And then I think if you pick up a part-time job, or you had a part-time job as part of your regular lifestyle in the past, that's not interrupted. What this is trying to cover is the interruption. So that would be my advice in that situation. But but somebody that's looking to capitalize in this situation, I think down the road, the worst case scenario, if that happened, if somebody got like a full-time job out of this and they didn't pay themselves their payroll during the time, it would just turn into a loan, and then they would just have to repay that instead of getting this tax-free grant, basically.
And so, but if they wanted to do unemployment, they couldn't have this job.
So you can't. So no PPP, just going straight to unemployment.
Say they wanted to go for unemployment and they still had this side, you know, they had this.
So I think state by state, there's nominal, like you could have nominal income. Like for example, you could have investment income while you're on unemployment. There's rules that as long as you're seeking full-time employment, you can do what you need to do to get by. That won't compromise the unemployment benefits that you're receiving.
Okay, Norman in San Francisco sends me a smiley face with a mask, but also is the SBA backed PPP loan via banks like the ARC loans during the last big recession?
I'm not familiar with ARC loan.
Yeah, I don't think so.
I
think this is this is like a state of the art benefit here.
So
it
Norman,
is unprecedented with the terms that they're providing. It's again a guarantee-free loan, no personal guarantee behind, and no collateral. So it is very unique in kind of what it's offering.
Heidi,
okay.
Can I ask a question that I've been texted?
Sure.
Okay, so the EIDL loans that is through the SBA, that first one that came out, right, chronologically, someone's wondering, how do you determine how much to ask for a loan in that respect, for that option? We understand the 2.5 times for the PPP, but if you're going for that other loan, which comes with that $10,000 grant, how do you know how much to ask for?
So that one, I believe it's up to $2 million. So you'd have to like show like what you're going to use it for, like as part of the application process. So it's just like when you're kind of buying a house, you're not going to get a mortgage for more than the house's value. So it's kind of like the same thing. And keep in mind, it's personally guaranteed, and you need to have collateral to offset the. So I would say probably a guideline is if you had $100,000 of collateral that you could put up, that's would be the amount that you would try to go for.
Okay.
Okay, so I'm gonna go to back to our how do stock. Okay, so some photographers are putting up stock sites and also reuse fees in terms of like the work that they have right now. How does that affect the PPP if they're creating streams of income, I think is the question, which I kind of feel like you just answered.
Yeah, so I mean, as long as you're like using the PPP proceeds to pay your payroll, no matter what your job is, you're getting in revenue to pay yourself also. So this PPP proceeds is supposed to bridge the gap between, just because you have revenue streams, you might not be getting paid right now too. You might be doing work and you might not be getting paid because the customers on the other side are having financial difficulties. So again, if you're getting the benefits, as long as you're using the benefits to pay those, mortgage interest, payroll, and utilities, those are qualified expenditures that will, down the line, will turn this into a forgiven loan.
So on that note, I keep getting the same question over and over again, and I feel like it's because we all want to take a deep breath. So, hey, Heidi, for sole proprietor using the loan to pay home office rent, would the loan be forgivable? No payroll. I think everybody wants to hear, yes, it's going to be forgiven. But I think that if you guys wouldn't mind just saying it again, because I think this is a twofold question. I think we're being asked the same question over and over again because people really want, I really want this answer clear. And anyway, so for sole proprietor using a loan to pay home office rent, would the loan be forgiven? He has no payroll.
Yeah. So again, I think there's two elements of this PPP that we need to be considerate of. And I think that's maybe why it's starting to get a little bit confusing. There's one element where you're trying to figure out how much can I get from this loan, okay? And that's relatively straightforward, whereby it looks at whatever your payroll was or the actual net profit you're sole proprietor from your tax statements, okay? You use that number to figure out how much you can get. The second element is what you're allowed to use that money for to be considered forgiven. So in addition to also making sure you're using that proceeds to pay for your payroll, it can also be allowed to pay for your rent. In these cases where you have historically expensed a portion of your home rent because you're using that for your home office, that will still be allowed as long as you can indicate and document that you've done this historically and you're not trying to game the system effectively, okay? So I hope separating out the two elements maybe helps a little bit.
I think you're helping extraordinarily on every level. I wanted to ask Erica a question that's coming in through here, which is, can you talk about your experience? Of course, now I lost it, sorry. Erica, can you share more details about your experience in filling out the EIDL application, especially as it pertains to the amount to ask for?
Well, I only did the $10,000 emergency request. So, I mean, I filled out other SBA loan applications in the past just because all my loans from my bank in the past years have been guaranteed by the SBA. So it's sort of a long process. You have to have profit and loss from 2019, lots of your articles of incorporation, lots of sort of corporate documents. But that's because I'm a corporation, an S corp. So I don't know if you're a sole proprietor, it may be different, but they're still going to want those types of financial records, your tax returns from the previous year. Matt, other items that you're familiar with or song that banks are asking for?
Yeah, for the traditional SBA loan, it's what you would get in a traditional loan application process. So they'll do a credit check, they'll do every document, from your, prove your expenses that you could prove to pay it back, sort of thing, and to prove your financial position with your financial statements, your tax returns, that sort of thing.
What if you're an LLC? She was saying that she had articles of incorporation. What if you're an LLC or, a different form of business?
Yeah, same thing. LLC, you'd still have articles of incorporation. You'd still have tax returns. If you're a single member LLC, you'd show your personal tax return of how you're reporting that income. So you'd still have maybe a little bit less because you don't have the official incorporation documents for a Schedule C person. So
okay, I have another question with a big, please in caps. So unemployment question, please. If one was employed W-2 for that less than 20 weeks before this went down, can you still get unemployment right now?
So, that is a state-by-state basis. So as long as you qualified, my understanding is as long as you qualified before, like whatever the state requirements are. So for example, here in Illinois, you need to be on a payroll for 2 quarters before you could get unemployment benefits. And my understanding of the new law didn't oversee that or step that gap. So then you in Illinois, if you weren't working for 2 quarters, you wouldn't be eligible for unemployment. So I guess it would be on a state-by-state basis.
I feel like we've asked this one again also, but as a sole proprietor, is one loan more beneficial than the other, or are they essentially the same, but one, the PPP, comes straight from the bank? I feel like I can answer that. You guys have made me.
Go ahead.
Yeah.
Erica, how about, do you want to jump in on that one?
Well, from my understanding, the emergency economic disaster loan is going to be, you're going to have to pay it back. The payroll protection, it seems like you can get a certain amount forgiven as long as you're spending it on the right things. Payroll, mortgage, utilities. I can't remember the other one, but there's another.
Contractors.
And
Contractors.
I would chime in that it's super important if you are fortunate enough to get both of these loans, you have to really document what you're spending the money on.
Mm-hmm.
And you can't, if you're using the PPP to pay for your employees and maybe some of your rent, you can't use the other loan to pay for your rent as well. So you really have to keep them separate. And you have to keep them very organized in terms of, because you're going to have to be able to reconcile this at the end and show what you spent your money on.
Yeah, keep your receipts and your invoices in a folder.
Right. What's saying when the audience wasn't part of this is that it's going to be on the other side really hard to track everything, right? And everybody keep your records, don't cross-pollinate. Really try very hard, like Heather was saying, if you get both loans, God love you, but make sure that you don't pay both anything the same, right? Song, you said this to Heather and I yesterday, and this is the point Heather just made, but I'd love for you to just like articulate it one more time, that you cannot cross-pollinate and everybody really has to be super diligent about this stuff.
Yeah, I mean, as you can imagine, that there's never a free lunch here. Because of how generous and attractive these terms are, we can almost guarantee you that come 8 weeks down the road for this PPP loan, this forgivable loan, there's going to be a lot more structure and rigidity around how they're going to document and audit whether you are actually using the sources of funds from that forgivable loan for the right stuff. So make your life a little bit easier, document everything, make sure you're also being very diligent about what you're using your money on, and just remember what the things you can put your money towards: payroll, 1099 employees, etc.
Okay, I have a really...
So one question sorry. Can I chime in?
No, I want you to, because I don't want to take us away from this thought, and my next question sort of does that, so please.
Well, someone is texting me about the PPP loans and calculating that based off of payroll. Can you also include pension payments into that? So I recall reading that you could, but I know yesterday there were new regulations. So when I'm calculating my payroll for the year, or my monthly payroll, and I'm multiplying by 2.5, am I allowed to include any pension payments that I share with my employees?
Yeah, the baseline number you're using to calculate should include your the payroll, which includes compensation. So that includes things like salary, wages, commission, for that, payments of vacation, parental, family, medical, or sick leave, and even healthcare benefits and insurance premiums related to that, and retirement benefits. And based on the most recent things we've seen, it also includes state and local taxes assessed for those employees. Does that help to clarify a little bit?
It does, yes, it helps answer the question. Thank you.
I have one more question just on this, or a point, is that once you get the loan, what you can get forgiven is what you pay after you get the loan, right? You can't pick the 8 weeks that are going to be covered since the disaster started. It has to be after you get the loan that then you're using the money to be forgiven. Is that correct?
Correct. That's when the clock starts, and that's when they start measuring.
Okay, sounds good.
So I just have one to clarify. If you have not filed a 2019 taxes, and are you able to use your 2018 returns for the PPP applications or the SBA loans?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. And then 2 more. I applied for SBA disaster loan assistance, and I got an application number, but never received an email confirmation or follow-up. Was my application received, or do I need to reapply? There were articles online the other day that people needed to reapply because they updated their system. Can either Matt or Songs sort of speak to this?
Yeah, I'm not too sure about that.
Look, Matt mentioned this earlier. The SBA is just backed up like crazy. They weren't meant to be lenders for the entire small business community. So what's happening, it has taken a while. However, if you've gotten the confirmation number, you can always call the SBA. And granted, it's a 1 to 2 hour wait time right now, but you can actually call them to check in on the status of it. The good news typically is that if you haven't received an automatic call or email response telling that you were denied, that's actually a good thing because you were able to kind of move forward for the further consideration. So don't necessarily view it as a bad thing, but again, I get it. It's anxious, and everyone gets anxious after not hearing back. So if you need to follow up, you can call them. You just have to maybe wait an hour or two on hold.
Here's another question. Are there services or agents that will shepherd people through this process, similar to a mortgage broker? I feel like we kind of discussed this about our bankers, right? And then obviously you guys, but any other resources that you guys can think of?
I mean, you could also go directly to an SBA lender. That's a SBA, not a bank, but an SBA branch, basically.
Here's another idea. You can contact the WBE, the organization that certifies minority women's enterprises. They will help anyone, not just women. There are other organizations like that. I could probably get a resource list for you to publish to the Workbook blog after this call.
Okay,
I just got a question texted about if you receive this PPP loan and it's and you need to start paying yourself, should you then be paying yourself through a payroll service, or should you continue to pay yourself as you had before, assuming you were self-employed?
Yeah, so if you were self-employed before and it's Schedule C, no change, you pay yourself the same way. If you were in payroll before, like as a work for a company, you pay yourself the same way through payroll.
Okay, thank you.
I think I have a similar question, and I wonder if we're getting texted by the same person, Heather. But if you don't, if you're a sole proprietor and use Schedule C as your payroll, can you use the loan to pay for some of the operating costs, such as advertising, et cetera? Feel like we answered that. Advertising is part of, so marketing for them is part of their business expenses. It's something that they've historically paid for anyways. So can they use it for?
So the only exception to that might be is if you had a person that you were paying for marketing and they were an independent contractor. So that would probably fall under the expenditure rules, because you're paying actually another person. But if you're paying like a big agency, I don't think that would qualify.
Okay, and
Okay, so here's a question just on that point. So let's say I get $10,000 and I use $6,000 of it to pay my employees, and I have $4,000 extra, and I decide that I need it to hire a 1099 employee or pay for some advertising or some other expense. At the end of all of this, does that just mean that $4,000 is just not forgivable, and then I'm paying that loan back at a very low percentage? Or does that mean I've like done something terrible and I shouldn't have used that $4,000 for that?
No, I think that's a great way to give an easy example. And rather, I think to the points earlier, the portions that you're not using on allowable expenses, it just simply means that's an it's just a loan at 1% interest rate for 2 years. So
Okay.
it's not the worst case scenario.
and then if you don't claim a home office expense, are you still able to pay your rent with this money?
So
If you're a sole proprietor,
if it's personal rent, this is not for like personal expenses, but it is for if you are a sole proprietor that has a home office, you have to make the argument that part of that is a business expense. So
This one, let me just be for clear. If you're a sole proprietor that uses a Schedule C as your payroll, so this is the same person who asked about the advertising costs. Now she's saying, she doesn't claim a home office, even though she probably does all of her freaking work from home and always has. But she hasn't historically claimed that. Can she use this money towards her rent? I think she can because she's taking her.
yeah, so I see. So it's going to be considered payroll to you when you receive this. So then you could turn around and use whatever your normal personal expenses are under that circumstance. So yeah, that's not a problem.
Question, give me a little thumbs up if I got it right on that. Okay, Steve is asking me, how do you calculate, say 20% of my income comes from production companies via W-2, but still freelance, and then the other 80 is 1099 work with agencies. How is my income in that case calculated? I would rather do a loan than do both unemployment and a loan. I don't think you can do unemployment and a loan. I think you guys were clear on that earlier. Yes?
Yeah, so if in this guy's situation, if your majority of your income is from self-employment income, that's what you're going to apply for this PPP thing. You're going to put in the secondary, it sounds like the 20% might be your part-time job. Now, if you got laid off of that, that's where I would say do the PPP first, then maybe try to apply for the unemployment after the 8 weeks is up if you're still in a bad situation, to try not to do both at the same time.
Right. Okay, and so how is my income in that case calculated? Do you remember that question, or am I too far from it?
So that'll be the part that you prove is like the 80% would be your Schedule C or self-employment income, would be the profit on your last filed tax return, would be that number.
Okay. So Candace asks, I was under the assumption that once the loan is approved, it will go back to 21520 to pay you from. Does everybody understand that question? Because I feel like I said it in an awkward manner.
I think what she's trying to ask is kind of how is that 215 date relevant to the overall loan? I think two things. One, your business had to have been around before 2/15/2020. In addition to that, one of the things Matt mentioned is that the allowable expenses can also include mortgage interest expense on that, right? So this mortgage interest had to have occurred prior to 2/15/2020. You couldn't have created a mortgage on March 1st and still be allowed to pay, still have that be allowable expense.
Okay, Candace, I hope that answers your question, but by all means, let me know if I did it incorrectly. If I want a PPP loan, what if I don't have any collateral?
No collateral needed for
That's
PPP.
okay.
Okay.
Only for the small business loan, the disaster loan in the beginning.
So does anybody else have any other questions coming in? Because I made a
I
very
have one.
okay, I was really nice
Okay, just
and we've just gone every week. I think this is better than what I did. So please, Erica, go ahead.
Well, I was just wondering, okay, so let's say you have an IRA or a 401k. I saw something about how you could potentially draw revenue from that. Can you do that during this time? Is that allowed? Do you have to pay it back? Is there a penalty?
Yeah, so usually if you're not of retirement age of 59 and a half, anything that you would pull out of retirement is considered an early distribution, and it's subject to a 10% penalty. So under these circumstances right now, due to the pandemic, if you need those funds, you can withdraw them. They're still taxable, but the 10% penalty is waived.
So it's tax like income if you take it out, but you don't have to pay a penalty.
Correct.
Got it.
I have another question. I'm an S Corp. I am an S Corp, the only employee. I don't have group health care plan. Can I use the loan towards my health insurance though?
So yes, that would be a qualified expense because it's considered payroll compensation. But there is a gray area right now, and I don't know, Song, maybe you, if a S Corp owner has health insurance and they're not paid as a group, if they can add that to the compensation, I would say try to get it in, right? Because it is a part of the compensation, and in the worst case scenario, the lender says we can't include that, and they reduce the loan amount.
So if
I think the key thing is, that, I mean, you want to make sure you're working with your lender on a lot of these specific questions. They're great questions, but the rule of thumb is you try your best to include what could be allowable to calculate that 2.5 times total loan amount. And then the lender will be the one that tells you whether that's allowed or not, because every lender is under kind of they're allowed to determine their underwriting standards at this point.
Okay, I think Candace is clarifying for me. I actually wanted to know if you just get reimbursed from the PPP once approved, or is there a back date it begins?
You don't get reimbursed. I'm still not sure if I'm clear on it. You don't get reimbursed. It's just what they're trying to help you consider what you're allowed to use that money for based on when you had a mortgage that was in place.
Yeah, so it's basically an advance. So here's the money. Here's what we want you to use it on to get forgiven. If not, you owe us back the part that you didn't use it on the appropriate expenditures.
So isn't it weird though that we're calculating this amount based on 2.5 times our payroll, but we're not 100% required to use it on payroll? We're allowed to use it on other things. I mean, isn't the idea that we're trying to keep our employees employed, or
yeah, so does
it assume that maybe some of my employees are on furlough or on unemployment or something?
All right, so that's a good point, Heather. So if you did furlough any employees, or you laid off some employees, because you're using last year's numbers where their payroll was included, when it comes time, even though you spent the money on new payroll, say, if your workforce went down before this disaster, there's it's called a full-time equivalent calculation. You have to disclose what your full-time equivalents were before paying and then afterwards. So if it went down, you can't lay people off and hire new people, or you could hire some people, but the intent of the law is if it goes down, then that part that it goes down by is not forgiven anymore. So
right. So to me that seems so. It's kind of like we're talking about all these different things you can use the money for, but those things then won't be forgiven if your amount of payroll has gone down. Correct?
Right. So then
if the amount of people has gone up.
In that case, it would turn into just a loan.
Right. Okay, so we need to be really clear that the PPP is designed to help you keep your employees employed. The SBA loan is designed to help you pay things like mortgage and rent and all of that. Is that accurate? Or have I complicated things?
No, it's a really good question.
No, I think it's a good question. I mean, the reality is in terms of how they're going to measure what is going to be forgivable based on how well you did to maintain your prior payroll, that hasn't been defined yet. Is that going to be based on the number of full-time equivalent? Is it going to be based on the total payroll that you thought your prior 2019 average monthly payroll was versus the next 8 weeks? That's still, I think, right now trying to be finalized between the SBA and lenders. However, the intent of the PPP is meant to primarily help you fund the capital needed to keep your employees working, even just to sit around to get paid, because they want to reduce the amount of unemployment out there. But all at the same time, they're trying to give all the employers and small businesses a little bit of buffer, like a 25% or so, to still be used towards very critical business expenses, including utility payments and rent and lease and interest costs, right? So again, they're trying to still silo in what you can use your money for, but the main purpose of the PPP is to still try to retain the employees that you have or have recently let go.
Okay.
I don't know what that means. What does that mean, that noise? It was just like lovely. Okay, so
We've been an hour.
Oh, I see. Tim asks, I paid tons of people through TEAM, a payroll service company, all my production support crew, assistants, stylists, models. Can I add that to my PPP calculations, even though these people are as needed employees, not part of my day-to-day staff?
Yeah, we've heard this question before in this industry. And again, correct me if I'm wrong, but it sounds like the dynamics are these individuals are actually employees of Team. Is that correct?
I would correct.
Okay, if that's the case, then Team is going to be filing for their PPP, putting those employees of theirs under their criteria. That was kind of the understanding that we had. So you would not, again, as someone who's kind of using Team as payroll, that may not work.
I'm so sorry. No, the answer is no. They are not considered employees of Team.
Okay. Then they're 1099 employees, and again, based on the most recent guidance, they're not allowing 1099 payroll to be considered as part of your payroll baseline calculation.
Okay, so I'm so sorry to be this back and forth crazy looking human being who keeps going, but I said that so incorrectly. The answer is yes, they are. So go back to your first answer that they were with Team. And Tim, I'm so sorry that I'm a bit of a dope and trying to read this on the fly.
So you're saying Team is a payroll service?
I believe that's the case.
So I think the one thing just made clear here, if the employees of Team are individuals you're using to help facilitate your service, but they're fully employed by Team, I believe that's going to make it difficult for you to claim them as part of your payroll for the PPP loan calculation, because Team would be doing this. They would be doing the same thing to claim those same employees.
Linda reminded me to breathe and restate the question. Gotta love you, Linda. Okay, so I think that answered, by the way. And then there was also, Heather from Sue from SF asks, regarding what Heather is saying about payroll, is what we pay ourselves as sole proprietor. Explain this in terms of what we ourselves can spend this money on food. Why do I sound so bizarre? Did my question come through?
Now, can you repeat that?
Maybe I can do it. I think she's saying if she gets the loan as a sole proprietor, what can she spend the money on, the loan proceeds? I'm assuming she's talking about a PPP loan for this question?
Yeah, I mean, I think, Matt, you may be on mute.
I think Matt's having trouble.
I think
Song, do you want to do that one, or I can fill her in?
Yeah, it's again, whether you're a sole proprietor or small business, the loan proceeds that you get from the PPP, the portion that will be considered forgiven has to be used towards payroll, 1099 costs, utility payments, and rent, and interest rate on debt, on mortgage.
if she pays herself a salary, she can, from that PPP loan, she can go and spend it on whatever she wants. So buy groceries, internet subscriptions, whatever. That's just her income.
Yeah.
So
After it pays her, yeah, you're right. After it pays her,
Yeah.
her pocket, she can use it for
Mhm.
living expenses. Absolutely.
Okay, I'd like to say to everybody, if you're not speaking, please mute your mics. Jim and my other administrators, please mute your mics because we're getting this ambient noise that's that, and there we are. Now it's better. Thank you, everyone. I feel like I know that everybody has a lot of questions. I know that we're not nearly done, but what everybody also knows is that both Song and Matt are really giving us so much today, so much more than we originally asked them for. They both have businesses. They both have clients and people that they need to be answering to right now. So I want us to start to wrap this up just in terms of them and their time. I know that we originally had meant to go much longer today, but I'd really like to be considerate and cognizant of what's going on with them. I also want to tell everyone that we're going to do this topic again next week. We may have some of the same people, we may have some different people, but I think that this is an ongoing thing. We have so much time, so many questions, so many things are relevant here. And so I just cannot thank everyone enough for their time. These guys are awesome. I wish I had done their introductions. They're just the best thing since sliced bread. And I just want to thank everybody so much for taking time today. And again, I'm so sorry to cut it short, but I really want to be considerate to these amazing people who gave us their time today. And anybody else want to say anything to sort of wrap this up in the end? Erica, Heather?
I think that was it.
Okay, and so
I think
Matt,
it was.
go ahead. I'm sorry, Heather.
No, I was just going to say thank you. You guys were amazing and incredible. I'm really appreciative of your time.
Yes, and again, I'll be inviting you back, and maybe you'll rethink it considering your day today. But really, thank you so much. And if you had, Matt or Song, if you had any parting advice for us, I'd certainly love to end it on that note.
Yeah, I'll start it off. Look, I know it's really challenging out there. We're all small businesses here on the line. So, your success is going to be our success as well. So we kind of live and die by you all. So I think, fortunately, everyone's working together. Banks have been very proactive this time around relative to 2008. So I think everyone is trying to be proactive and get ahead of it. The key thing that you can do to really help yourself kind of weather the storm for the next few months, hopefully it's not too long, is you got to plan and get ahead of everything. Forecast out what your cash flow is going to look like for the next few months. This has been one of the key services we're helping with our current clients so that you know at what point you're going to run out of cash. And if you want to stay around and come out the other end, what type of a loan, how much of a loan you need, the assistance is out there. So if there's anything to take away, get ahead of the curve here. If you wanted to apply for any of these loans that we talked about, you're going to be in a much better position to apply for it sooner rather than later, because at the end of the day, there's a lot of small businesses applying for this now, and the capital just will not be there indefinitely.
Matt? Are you muted?
Yeah, I think he's not working now.
So with that thumbs up and my greatest gratitude to all of you today, we're going to bring it to a close, and we'll be doing this next week. So everybody stay safe and healthy, and hug your families and your pets. And thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you all. Be safe.
Bye.
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 Heidi, you have to end the